April 8, 1943. Dawn is only just beginning to bleed across the horizon above northern France, smearing pale streaks of blue across a sky that still feels half asleep. At 27,000 feet, the air is thin, sharp, and biting, cold enough to burn exposed skin, cold enough to remind every airman aboard the RAF Armstrong Whitworth Whitley that this mission is happening far from home. Inside the bomber's dimly lit fuselage, Flight Lieutenant Bill Goldfinch, just 23 years old, steadies himself near the navigation table as the aircraft vibrates from engine strain. The Whitley is lumbering, outdated compared to the Luftwaffe's newer fighters, but its crew knows how to coax every mile from it. Goldfinch checks headings, wind drift, and the faint glow of his instruments with practiced, quick motions. His flight jacket creaks as he leans forward, pencil in hand. The intercom crackles. "Bandits below 2 o'clock low." Your stomach would drop hearing that. Goldfinch's doesn't, he's trained for this, but adrenaline floods his limbs with electric heat. The Whitley banks hard as the pilot tries to evade the climbing shapes of two Messerschmitt Bf 110s, twin-engine hunters with shark-like noses and forward-facing cannons. Goldfinch grips the table, boots skidding across metal decking as the bomber shudders under the sudden maneuver. A moment later, the first burst of cannon fire rips across the starboard wing in a spray of sparks and torn aluminum. The gunner fires back, tracers streaking like red needles across the sky. "Hold her steady," Goldfinch shouts through the intercom, trying to plot us north. But the Whitley isn't going to outrun the Germans. Everyone aboard knows that. A second pass from the Bf 110s punches holes through the fuselage. Oxygen masks rattle and dangle, loose equipment bounces violently, one engine coughs, sputters, and flames out. The bomber begins to yaw to the right, tail wobbling. "Prepare to bail out," the pilot commands. Goldfinch feels the words before he hears them. The sensation is unmistakable, the sinking realization that the aircraft is no longer a machine under human control but a doomed piece of falling metal. Frosty air rushes through the open hatch as the crew scrambles. Another cannon burst screams past the cockpit, and the bomber lurches downward in a gut-twisting dive. Goldfinch pulls on his parachute harness, clips it, and moves toward the escape hatch. He can taste metal on his tongue. Fear, oil fumes, burning insulation. Behind him, the engines howl, then cough out their last breath. He jumps. The roar becomes silence, vast, empty, freezing silence broken only by wind ripping past his ears. The bomber spirals away in smoke far below. Goldfinch pulls his chute, it snaps open with a whip crack that jolts his spine. For a moment, he hangs weightless, suspended over occupied France. Below him, the fields look deceptively peaceful, stitched with hedgerows and farmhouses, but the war is everywhere. He knows the ground he's drifting toward is crawling with German patrols. His boots hit a muddy field with a heavy thud, knees buckling. He scrambles out of the harness immediately, burying the chute under brush. Not 10 seconds later, he hears shouting, distant but growing. Goldfinch runs. He sprints through a thicket, heart hammering as boots crash behind him. Branches whip his face, roots threaten to trip him. He pushes harder, lungs burning, until a rifle round cracks past his left ear and slams into a tree trunk ahead. Bark explodes outward. Hands grab him from behind, 3 soldiers tackling him at once, slamming him to the ground. His cheek hits cold mud. A rifle butt presses against the back of his neck. Englander, one of them, spits, and they haul him to his feet, tie his wrists, and march him toward the nearest road where a Kubelwagen waits. Goldfinch is shoved into the back seat. A soldier confiscates the RAF wings from his tunic with an expression of contempt, as though he has personally plucked a feather from an enemy bird. The vehicle rattles along rutted farm tracks toward a small village-turned-German outpost. At first light, civilians stare as the soldiers drag him through the square. Some look away quickly, others stare too long. Goldfinch is thrown into a stone building that once may have been a schoolhouse. Wooden desks have been pushed aside to make room for a makeshift interrogation room. A Wehrmacht officer stands behind a table, hands neatly clasped behind his back. His uniform is immaculate, his expression is cold and measured. "You are a spy," the officer says without preamble. "You were dropped to sabotage rail lines." Goldfinch shakes his head. "I'm aircrew, my aircraft was shot down." The officer steps closer. Without uniform insignia, without papers convenient. He gestures to the sergeant, take him outside. Goldfinch is marched to a courtyard. A firing squad is already standing there, rifles loaded, boots aligned, expressions unreadable. The sergeant ties him to a post. The officer reads a sentence he doesn't bother to understand. The rifles rise. Cold air fills Goldfinch's lungs one last time. Fewer. 6 rifles crack as one. And then something impossible happens. Silence, a stunned murmur. Every rifle has misfired. Goldfinch blinks, he's still alive, still standing. Even the officer looks shaken, eyes narrowing with a flicker of unease. The sergeant reloads, the squad prepares again. This time Goldfinch thinks, this time they won't all misfire. But the universe has other plans. The rifles are raised again, muzzles leveling with slow, mechanical precision. Goldfinch feels the rope tightening against his wrists, the post digging into his spine. The soldiers inhale, shoulders rising in unison. Fewer. Nothing. Not a single rifle fires. A few clicks, a hollow metallic clank. But no gunpowder ignites, no bullet leaves a barrel. One soldier lifts his rifle, staring at it in disbelief. Another ejects the cartridge, perfectly intact. The officer steps forward, snatches a rifle, checks it himself, and chambers a fresh round. His jaw tightens in frustration, in embarrassment, and just for a moment in fear. Goldfinch watches their faces shift. Soldiers glance at one another as if someone among them must be cursed or protected. The officer barks an order, again. The squad reforms, rifles lifted, knuckles white. Goldfinch braces for the 3rd time. Fewer. Silence. Again. A tremor moves through the line, the officer's hand twitches. This is no longer discipline, this is dread. He strides toward Goldfinch, gripping his Luger. Enough of this. The barrel presses against Goldfinch's forehead, cold as winter steel. The officer's finger curls around the trigger. For one heartbeat, Goldfinch sees nothing but the future collapsing into a pinprick. One flash of light and it's over. Click. The Luger jams. The officer's breath stutters. That wasn't supposed to happen. He pulls back the slide, checks the mechanism, tries again. Click. Goldfinch exhales shakily. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. A superstition creeps into the courtyard like fog. One soldier makes the sign of a cross. Another lowers his rifle with a whisper. Even the officer, once rigid and certain, seems unmoored. Enough. This man won't die today. Or perhaps can't. Take him inside, the officer snaps, though the authority in his voice cracks around the edges. Goldfinch is dragged away, boots scraping across the dirt. Behind him, the firing squad is already murmuring. He can feel their stares on the back of his neck, not as soldiers looking at a prisoner, but as men looking at an omen. Inside the stone building, Goldfinch is shoved into a cell, bare walls, straw on the floor, a small barred window that smells of rust. The door slams shut. He sits against the wall, still shaking, still alive. Minutes become hours. He loses track of the time until footsteps echo down the corridor, heavy boots, purposeful. The officer from earlier unlocks the door. He's flanked by 2 soldiers with expressionless faces. You will be transported, he says curtly. Higher command will decide your fate. Goldfinch says nothing. His throat feels scraped raw. He is hauled out, wrists bound. The morning light is harsher now, more certain. The soldiers push him onto the back of a truck and climb in after him. As the engine starts, he feels the vibration through the wooden slats beneath him. The road jostles him with every pothole. Villages blur past, occupied towns scarred by banners, checkpoints, and watchtowers. Goldfinch tries to memorize the bends in the road, the smell of pine, the distant river. Escape is never a fantasy for an RAF airman, it is an assignment. An hour passes, then another. Eventually, the truck stops at a more fortified outpost, larger barracks, taller fences. Goldfinch is escorted into another courtyard. This one is crowded with soldiers. A new officer approaches, inspecting him with thinly veiled contempt. "This is the Englishman," he asks. "Yes, Herr Oberleutnant." "Good." He motions to several guards. "Prepare the prisoner." Goldfinch's stomach drops. No squad this time. No rifles. The guards grab him, push him to the ground, and bind his ankles. One soldier steps forward holding a steel hand grenade, the iconic stick grenade nicknamed the potato masher. He unscrews the cap and pulls the cord with a swift yank. The fuse hisses. Goldfinch's pulse slams in his ears. The grenade is tossed, lands 3 feet from him, rolling once in the dirt. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Nothing. The grenade doesn't detonate. The guards stare at it. One nudges it with his boot, nervous. Another looks skyward, muttering something under his breath as though trying to appease a restless spirit. The officer storms forward red-faced. Try another. Another grenade, another fuse. It hisses, rolls, settles. Silence. A second dud. A third. Goldfinch lies there tied, staring at the motionless explosives around him. Even he feels the surreal absurdity of it. The odds are impossible, irrational, unbelievable. The officer finally snaps. Enough, leave him. But this time his voice is thinner, frayed. The guards step back. The courtyard is still except for one thing, the unmistakable shift in the soldiers' eyes. They're afraid of him. Goldfinch is dragged to his feet and marched away quickly as if prolonged exposure might invite misfortune. He is shoved into another truck, destination unknown. Hours later, as the vehicle rumbles deeper into Germany, one guard mutters to another. Send him to the place no man escapes, let fate deal with him there. Goldfinch doesn't know the name yet. But soon he will. A fortress. A legend. A prison built for men like him. Colditz Castle. The truck grinds uphill, gears snarling as the engine strains against the steep road. Outside the wooden slats, the world has grown darker, dense forest, jagged limestone cliffs, and a cold wind that whistles like something warning intruders to turn back. Goldfinch sits wedged between 2 guards, wrists still bound, shoulders aching from hours of jolting travel. Every bump in the road slams his ribs against the truck bed. And then he sees it. At first, the silhouette emerges like a crown of broken teeth on the ridge line. Then the full shape of it looms into view, an enormous medieval fortress carved into the cliffs. Stone walls hundreds of feet high, turrets like watchful eyes, a castle built to dominate the landscape and anyone who dared approach it. Colditz Castle. Saxony, deep inside Nazi territory. A place whispered about in POW circles, a place meant to break men who could not be broken anywhere else. The guards tense as the truck approaches the outer gates. One taps the butt of his rifle anxiously against his boot. Another avoids looking directly at Goldfinch, as if the man beside him, the one the bullets couldn't kill, carries a presence that might rub off. The gates groan open. The truck rolls into a courtyard paved with uneven stones and ringed by high walls that swallow the sky. Goldfinch feels a strange pressure settle on him, the weight of centuries of prisoners who had stood where he now stands. He's yanked from the truck, boots skidding across the stones. A guard shoves him toward a tall, gaunt officer with a clipboard. The officer's uniform is pristine, his expression severe and sharp as a razor. He looks up from the papers, eyes narrowing. Name: Flight Lieutenant Bill Goldfinch, Royal Air Force. The officer pauses, flicks to another page. Ah, you. His gaze lingers on Goldfinch with a mixture of recognition and irritation, as if fate has played some joke he isn't privy to. You have caused considerable difficulty for several field units, he says in a clipped tone. Here there will be no accidents. The last word drips with something like contempt or superstition. He gestures and 2 guards seize Goldfinch's arms. You are in the Offlog IVC, the escape-proof prison, where we keep the most persistent, most creative, and most troublesome of your kind. Goldfinch manages a breath, sounds like a distinguished crowd. The officer doesn't smile. He turns away. Goldfinch is marched deeper into the fortress, through heavy doors, down narrow stone corridors that smell of damp earth and chalky dust, past barred windows that let in nothing but slivers of gray light. Every corner has a guard. Every hallway echoes with the metallic jingle of keys and the thick clunk of boots. Inside the main POW wing, life hums in a strange, subdued rhythm. Prisoners move in groups, some talking in low voices, others hunched over makeshift chessboards crafted from scrap wood and bottle caps. A few lean against railings on upper levels, watching newcomers with curiosity sharpened by boredom. A British officer steps forward, eyes brightening as he sees Goldfinch. New arrival RAF by the look of you's name. Goldfinch. There's a beat, then a grin spreads across the man's face. Oh, you're Goldfinch, we've heard the stories. They shot at you and nothing happened, didn't they? Goldfinch shrugs, something like that. The officer claps him on the shoulder. Well, cheer up. If you had to be dumped into German hands somewhere, you picked the one place the war can't get any stranger. Goldfinch is shown to his quarters, a bare room with 2 wooden bunks, a small table, and a barred window overlooking the courtyard. It's hardly luxury, but it's warmer than the trucks, the cells, the courtyards where firing squads tested their luck. He drops onto the lower bunk, exhaling deeply for the first time since morning. But Colditz doesn't allow rest for long. Within minutes, a group of British prisoners enter the room, faces sharp with interest, shoulders squared with quiet confidence. These are not beaten men, they carry themselves like soldiers still on duty. One steps forward, a tall man with a thin mustache and an air of dry humor. Welcome to Colditz, I'm Lieutenant Tony Rolt, we run things our way here. He gestures casually to the walls. The Germans think this place is escape-proof, we consider that a challenge. Goldfinch raises an eyebrow, escape-proof is it? Rolt grins, not for lack of trying. Tunnels, ropes, disguises, forged papers, we've attempted it all. Another man chimes in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. And rumor has it you've survived more execution attempts than any man alive. Might be you've got a bit of luck the rest of us could use. Goldfinch leans back on the bunk. I'm here to serve the war effort. If that means escaping, I'll keep trying. Rolt looks at him meaningfully. Good, because we're working on something ambitious. He pauses, glancing at the door before leaning closer. In the attic, high in the forbidden zone. Goldfinch feels a spark of curiosity. What is it? Rolt's eyes gleam. A way out, a real one, but we'll need clever hands, engineering skills. He tilts his head. And nerves of steel. Goldfinch breathes in slowly. After everything, the crash, the capture, the firing squad, the grenades, the impossible survival, maybe this is where the road was always leading. Tell me what you're building, he says. Rolt smiles. A glider. Night settles over Colditz like a stone lid, heavy and absolute. The castle's outer lights cast long, jagged shadows that stretch across the courtyard and climb the walls like black cracks. Inside, the hallways dim to a muted gloom, just enough light for guards to patrol, not enough for prisoners to move freely. But that's never stopped anyone here. Goldfinch follows Tony Rolt up a narrow stairwell long after roll call, boots muffling against the worn stone steps. The air grows colder with every level they climb, dusty, old, forgotten by anyone who doesn't have a reason to seek the top of the castle. Rolt pauses at a wooden door reinforced with a single, rusted padlock. This way, he whispers. Another POW, an engineer named Jack Best, slips from the shadows with a tiny metal tool. He kneels at the lock, inserting the makeshift pick. Within seconds, click, the padlock falls open. Goldfinch raises an eyebrow. Best grins, German engineering overrated. They push inside. The attic stretches out before them, a vast, cathedral-like chamber beneath the castle's massive roof. The wooden beams arch overhead like ribs, thick and ancient. Dust motes swirl in faint moonlight that filters through slit windows. It smells of dry wood, must, and secrecy. And then Goldfinch sees it. At first it looks like scaffolding, then like some peculiar skeletal creature. And finally, unmistakably like the emerging frame of an aircraft, ribs, spars, and a long central spine laid across benches scavenged from every corner of the prison. A glider. Half-built, beautiful, impossible. Goldfinch steps toward it, nearly breathless. Good God, you're serious. Rolt beams proudly. The Colditz Cock, 2-man glider, and if we get it finished before the war ends, it'll sail us right off the roof and over the river. Best taps a wooden rib, inspired by primary gliders, nothing fancy, but we're building it from bed slats, floorboards, and whatever fabric we can find. And you think it'll fly? Goldfinch asks. Rolt shrugs, that's why we need you. Goldfinch walks along the craft skeleton, running his fingers over the curve of the wing. The wood is sanded smooth, carefully shaped despite primitive tools. Stretched across one section is fabric made from dozens of RAF-issue sleeping bags, cut into strips and sewn together. "Your handiwork?" Goldfinch asks. "Stitching crew," Rolt says, pointing to a pile of needles, thread, and salvaged canvas. "We work in shifts. Guards almost never come up here. They think the attic is too cold and too empty to hide anything useful." Goldfinch tests the weight of one of the spars. "This isn't just workable, it's clever, light, flexible, and if we reinforce the keel beam here," he points to a joint, "we can support the load of 2 grown men during launch without snapping." Rolt raises his eyebrows. "So you're in then?" Goldfinch doesn't hesitate. "I'm in." The men move deeper into the attic, careful with every footstep. The boards creak like brittle bones. At the far end lies the launch runway, a kind of wooden ramp built at an angle, pointing toward a section of roof that overlooks the courtyard. Best explains, "We plan to attach the glider to a counterweight system in the clock tower. Drop the weight, release the tension, and fling the glider off the roof. We'll need about, 15 knots of lift to get going." Goldfinch nods. "With the right wind direction, the height advantage here should give us the glide ratio we need." He stops. Because something hits him all at once, the madness and genius of it. They're building an aircraft. In secret. Inside a Nazi fortress. Using prison scraps and hope. Rolt watches him closely. This is bigger than just escape. This is morale, purpose, proof the Germans can't cage the mind. Goldfinch reaches for a plain blade, one of several handmade tools sharpened from soup ladles and spare metal. He tests its edge. "When's the next work shift?" he asks. Rolt smiles. "Right now." They work in silence broken only by the rasp of sandpaper and the soft scrape of wood being shaped. Every sound feels amplified in the cavernous attic. Every shadow feels like a threat. Hours pass. The glider takes form little by little, a wing here, a rib there, the delicate shaping of a nose cone that will one day cut through a cold Saxon wind. At one point, voices echo faintly from below, German guards on rounds. Everyone freezes, tools clutched tightly. They wait, breath held. When the echoes fade, work resumes. Goldfinch wipes a line of sweat and dust from his brow. "If we pull this off, we'll be legends." Rolt chuckles softly. "If we pull this off, we'll be free." Goldfinch glances around the attic, the beams, the shadows, the half-finished glider. "This place tried to kill me," he mutters. "Failed every time, maybe it owes me something." Bess taps him on the shoulder. "Then let's collect." And so they build. Night after night. Shift after shift. Above the guards, above the prison walls, above all expectation. The glider grows. And so does the dream. Dawn seeps through the narrow attic windows in pale streaks, painting the dust in shimmering gold. Another night's work is done. Goldfinch stretches his stiff shoulders, the cold biting deep into his joints. Below him, the castle stirs, guards changing shifts, boots thudding across the courtyard stones, the daily machinery of captivity grinding back into motion. He peers out one of the slits in the stone, taking in the sprawling fortress below. The steep drop, the inner yard, the steep roofs. He studies it as a pilot again, not a prisoner. Wind direction, launch angle, lift. Every observation feeds the glider taking shape behind him. Beside him, Tony Rolt leans on a beam. Weather's shifting. If we get snow this week, the guards will be more interested in staying warm than patrolling the roof. "That might be our opening," Goldfinch replies. Rolt nods, "and we'll be ready." They descend back into the main prison wing just before morning roll call. Doors slam open as guards herd prisoners into formation. Goldfinch joins the line, keeping his expression blank, heartbeat steady. Above them, the attic remains a secret world, fragile, hidden, miraculous. A guard passes too close, his eyes locking onto Goldfinch's for a moment. There's still something there, unease. Rumor spreads fast in camps like this, and the impossible events surrounding Goldfinch's capture have taken on a mythic shape. The guard looks away first. Later, in the mess hall, Goldfinch slides onto a bench next to Jack Best. The air smells of boiled cabbage and overcooked potatoes. Best leans in, wing ribs are nearly finished. Fabric team stitched another 6 feet last night. Goldfinch breaks a piece of bread. We'll need more canvas for the control surfaces. Working on it, Best smirks. Someone accidentally misplaced a few German flour sacks. Goldfinch raises an eyebrow. Accidentally. Terribly tragic mishap, Best murmurs. Through the window, snow begins to drift. Slow, silent flakes. Goldfinch watches them fall and feels a strange, quiet electricity in the air. Not long now. That night, the attic buzzes with energy. Work crews move with practiced stealth, one team sanding wing surfaces, another shaping the rudder, another stitching fabric to wooden frames. Goldfinch crouches beside the central spar, measuring tension across the wing with a length of scavenged wire. This section needs reinforcement, he says, if we hit turbulence right after launch. We won't, Rolt replies, if the wind holds steady. Goldfinch tightens the last joint and sits back. Wind doesn't care about our plans. Rolt chuckles, we'll make it care. There's laughter, subdued, careful, but real. For the first time since his capture, Goldfinch feels something like the warmth of a squadron readying for a mission. Not the desperation of escapee, but the purpose of flight. As the hours crawl forward, Best climbs onto a beam high above the glider, holding a lantern low. Everyone quiet, he whispers sharply. Bootsteps. Below them. Heavy, slow, getting closer. Goldfinch freezes mid-motion, hand resting on the wooden wing. The attic is supposed to be off-limits. Guards rarely check it, but tonight one has wandered closer than usual. The beam of a flashlight cuts across the floorboards just beneath the attic hatch. Rolt mouths don't move. Dust hangs in the air, suspended like breath caught in a throat. Goldfinch feels his pulse thudding against the boards under his knees. The guard pauses, his boots pivot, the light drifts upward toward the hatch. A beat. Another. Then voices from down the corridor call him away. The guard turns, boots fading into distance. The attic exhales collectively. Best whispers down from the rafters, remind me to buy him a drink someday. Goldfinch mutters back, in another life. The work resumes, but slower, quieter. Every scrape, every nail tap is deliberate. The tension lingers like static electricity. Hours later, the final rib of the port wing is installed. Goldfinch steps back, chest rising with something halfway between exhaustion and awe. The glider is no longer an idea. No longer a sketch. No longer a skeleton. It is becoming an aircraft. Rolt appears beside him. Once we finish the wing coverings, the control wires and the launch cradle will be ready. And the counterweight, Goldfinch asks. Already in place, Rolt says. We'll drop it from the old clock tower shaft, should give us enough force to launch a 2-man glider clean off the roof. Goldfinch nods slowly. 2 men, he repeats. Rolt glances at him. I know what you're thinking, you're on the short list. Goldfinch says nothing for a moment, then. I didn't survive firing squads and grenades to stay inside these walls. Rolt claps him on the shoulder. Good, because when the time comes, we'll need a pilot who understands lift, balance, and risk better than any of us. The snow outside continues to fall, gathering on the windowsills. The temperature drops. The castle grows more silent. A sign. A season turning. A moment approaching. The glider awaits. And so does the chance, fragile, dangerous, glorious to fly. Snow piles thick on the eaves of Colditz Castle, muting the world into a muffled hush. Each flake falls slow and deliberate, like time itself hesitating. Inside the attic, lanterns glow behind makeshift blackout curtains, casting warm halos over the nearly finished glider. Goldfinch tightens the last length of control cable, fingers numb, breath fogging as he exhales. To his left, Tony Rolt tests the tension on the elevator rig, giving a satisfied nod. Above them on a beam, Jack Best checks the pulley alignment for the counterweight system. It's ready, Best whispers, she's real now. Goldfinch steps back, taking in the shape before him. The Colditz Cock, a fragile, brilliant rebellion against stone walls and iron bars, wings smooth under stretched fabric, nose cone sanded to aerodynamic clean lines, every joint bound with ingenious precision from stolen nails and hand-shaped wood. Rolt lowers himself from the cradle mount. Tonight was supposed to be the test run, one last check before we schedule the escape. Goldfinch nods. We'll wait for the right weather, right guard rotation, right? A sharp whistle echoes from below. A signal from the French prisoners in the kitchen. Footsteps. Several. Climbing. Rolt curses under his breath. Someone's coming up now. Best snuffs the lantern so fast the attic plunges into total darkness. Goldfinch's hand finds the glider's spar, steadying himself as he feels the boards creak beneath his feet. Boots ascend the wooden steps. Slow, heavy, too purposeful. Goldfinch's heart thunders. The attic has been safe for months, untouched by guards, forgotten beneath the castle roof. But tonight something has changed. A patrol shift, a rumor, a mistake. The hatch latch rattles. Rolt hisses, hide now. In darkness, the POWs scatter behind beams beneath worktables into shadowed pockets carved by months of secrecy. Goldfinch slips beneath the wing, lying flat against the cold boards. The wooden ribs loom over him like the bones of a beast shielding him. The hatch creaks open. Light floods in from a guard's torch. Goldfinch holds his breath. A German NCO steps inside, tall silhouette, steam rising from his breath, torch beams sweeping across the rafters. The floorboards groan as he walks deeper into the attic. One more step and he'll see the glider. One more sweep of the torch. One breath too loud. Goldfinch counts the seconds in his head, each one stretching thin as wire. The guard stops. Listens. The beam lingers on the far wall, then sweeps right toward the wing. Goldfinch presses himself thinner against the boards. The beam passes inches from the trailing edge of the glider's fabric. He swears he can feel the heat of it. Then, a distant shout from the courtyard breaks the silence. Another guard calling orders, a metallic clatter. The NCO stiffens, hesitates, then turns back toward the hatch. He leaves. The hatch shuts. Darkness crashes over them. Goldfinch waits for Rolt's whisper, waits for breath, movement, anything. But the attic remains silent for several long seconds as though no one dares believe what just happened. Finally, Best exhales a shaking laugh. That was close enough to count as cardiac training. Rolt emerges from behind a beam. We can't delay much longer. The Germans are getting restless. If they search this attic properly, we're done. Goldfinch stands, brushing dust from his trousers. Then we push the timeline. Rolt nods, agreed. Tomorrow we finalize the launch cradle, the next clear night with the right wind. We fly, Goldfinch finishes. But fate is mercurial in wartime. The next day, rumors ripple through the prisoners like electricity through a wire. The Americans are advancing. Fast. Artillery rumble rolls faintly from the east on cold air. Guards argue in corners, officers bark contradictory orders, trucks roar through the valley below the castle. Colditz is no longer calm, no longer focused. It is a place holding its breath. By evening, the truth becomes clear. The war is ending around them. Rolt, Best, and Goldfinch climb back to the attic. They stand before the completed glider, silent, reverent. We could still do it, Best offers quietly. Tonight, fly before they evacuate. Rolt runs his hand along the wingtip. Or we wait, the Americans may be here within days. Goldfinch stares at the craft, months of labor, a miracle carved from scraps, an escape defying logic, gravity, and every German's certainty. He places his palm against the nose of the glider. I survived firing squads, he mutters. Grenades, fate itself. If the war ends before we fly, maybe that's the final twist. Rolt sighs, the cock deserves the sky. Goldfinch nods softly, I know. The three men stand silently as snow drifts outside the narrow windows, a curtain closing on the greatest escape that almost was. And below them, in the courtyard, the guards gather anxiously as distant artillery grows louder. The war will end before the glider ever touches wind. But later, years later, historians and engineers will rebuild the Colditz Cock from the POWs' exact plans. They'll wheel it to a runway, they'll tow it into open sky. And they'll watch it fly, just as Goldfinch always knew it would. Morning breaks with a strange stillness over the fortress. For the first time since Goldfinch arrived, the guards look more like prisoners than the men they oversee. Radios blare fragmented orders. Officers stalk the courtyard with unease in their strides. The once rigid routines of captivity have unraveled overnight. Goldfinch stands at the barred window of his barracks, watching the tensions swirl like smoke in the icy air. A German corporal paces below, clutching his rifle not with confidence, but with the nervous grip of someone who no longer knows which side of history he stands on. Rolt enters the room quietly. "The Americans are closer than we thought," he says. "Some of the guards want to surrender, others want to run." Goldfinch tightens the strap of his worn RAF jacket. "What's command saying?" Rolt shakes his head. "There's no command anymore, just chaos." A distant boom rolls through the valley, artillery fire, unmistakable, muffled only by the heavy winter air. Both men turn toward the sound, instinct snapping them into pilot and soldier once more. "It's today," Goldfinch says. "Has to be." Rolt nods slowly. "Then we get everyone ready." The courtyard swells with restless energy. British, Polish, Dutch, and French prisoners form clusters, speaking in low, excited voices. Even the guards stand oddly still, casting glances toward the main gate, toward the horizon, toward the thunder approaching from beyond the hills. Goldfinch spots a young German sentry, barely more than a boy, shifting nervously. The lad's helmet is crooked, his breath rapid. He lowers his rifle when Goldfinch approaches. "You should go inside," Goldfinch says gently. "No one here wants a fight." The boy hesitates, then nods and backs away, relief flooding his face. Moments later, the first American armored vehicle rounds the bend below the castle's slope, its engine roaring, treads grinding the frozen earth. A white star gleams on the metal plating like a promise. Cheers erupt from the prisoners. Shouts of triumph, disbelief, and release surge upward, bouncing off the ancient stone walls. Guards drop their weapons, some raise their hands, others simply sit down, overwhelmed and exhausted. The American tank stops at the gate and infantrymen pour out behind it, weapons ready but lowered at the sight of the jubilant POWs. Goldfinch feels his chest tighten. For the first time in months, maybe years, he lets himself breathe fully. Rolt grabs his shoulder. "We made it, Bill." Goldfinch nods, though his eyes drift upward to the attic window, to the roofline just beyond it, to the place where the glider waits, silent and still. "It's over," Rolt says. "Almost," Goldfinch replies. They climb the familiar stairs one last time. The attic is cold and dim, just as it was the night before. But something is different now. The weight of secrecy is gone, the risk, the fear. What remains is awe. The glider sits in the center of the space, wings stretched, fabric tight, wood gleaming faintly in the morning light. A promise built by men who refused to surrender their imaginations. Bess steps beside them, breathing out a sigh. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Goldfinch rests his hand along the leading edge. "She deserved the sky." Rolt runs his fingers across the cockpit frame. "She'll get it someday, one way or another." Goldfinch doesn't know how, but he feels the certainty in Rolt's voice. The three men stand silent, each lost in thought, each feeling the same bittersweet truth. The glider saved them not by flying but by being worth flying for. It gave them purpose, focus, freedom of mind when freedom of body was impossible. Goldfinch whispers, "Thank you," though he isn't sure whether he's speaking to the glider, to his friends, or to fate itself. The POWs are escorted out of the castle. Snow crunches under their boots as they descend the hill toward the waiting American convoy. Goldfinch glances back only once. The fortress looms, ancient and immovable, but he knows now that even stone can't contain the will of determined men. As he climbs aboard a transport truck, an American sergeant hands him a steaming cup of coffee. "Hell of a place up there," the sergeant says, jerking a thumb toward the castle. "You've no idea," Goldfinch replies with a tired smile. The truck rumbles forward, carrying him away from captivity and toward home. Years later, long after the war, engineers will study the Colditz glider using original measurements drawn by the POWs. They will rebuild it with precision, They will roll it onto a runway, attach a tow line, and lift it into open sky. Goldfinch, older, dignified, quieter than the young man who survived execution attempts, will watch that replica soar. He will see the wings catch air. He will see the nose rise. He will see the aircraft built in secrecy, in fear, in defiance, finally fly. A miracle that came too late for escape. Just in time for history. Goldfinch will smile, eyes glistening. Worth the wait, he'll whisper. Because some flights are meant not for survival, but for story. And this story, his story, soars higher than any wall ever built.